Hey guys, Spudknocker here, as always, and today you guys are probably thinking, what in the world could this video possibly be about that DCS World pilots can't turn right? And it kind of relates back to that old funny movie Zoolander, where Derek Zoolander, the main character, has this weird impediment where he cannot turn his body to the left-hand side. Well, DCS World pilots have the opposite problem because they can't turn their aircraft to the right-hand side. This is kind of an obscure and intricate topic that affects not just DCS World pilots, but also real world pilots as well. Whether you're flying a Cessna 172, a pit special doing aerobatics, a Boeing 737, or an F-18 in real life as well. And as a result of the kind of obscure nature of this topic, we're just going to kind of do a free-flowing video where we just discuss the topic and the two main reasons why this is a true phenomenon when it comes to both virtual and real-life pilots as well, and why it tends to affect DCS World pilots to a higher degree due to the way that most people have their cockpit setups in their homes. So let's go ahead and hop into the seat of our F-18C Hornet, and we'll go and fly some right traffic today, doing some touch and goes while we discuss this topic. So let's go ahead and head on into the office. Alright, and of course the F-18C has been looking really fantastic lately, and it looks even better on the gorgeous Syria map here. So we'll go ahead and get on ready to taxi out to the runway. So this topic was something that was brought to my attention by my two mentors who have taught me everything I know about aerobatics, flying aerobatic aircraft, and teaching aerobatics in real life. They were both two former military pilots, one a Marine Corps pilot, one a Navy pilot. The Marine Corps pilot was an aggressor pilot for a very long time and even flew the F-21 Kafir when it was leased to the Marine Corps back in the day. And he is the one who really gave me the insights to this, I don't know if it's issue, but more phenomenon when it comes to pilots, whether military, civilian, digital, or real-life pilots. And the two reasons for this can be broken down to both the actual physics of the way aircraft fly, particularly propeller-driven aircraft, but it applies to jets as well as the physiology of pilots, especially aircraft equipped with sticks as opposed to yokes. So that would mean aerobatics airplanes, fighter jets, things like that are more affected, as well as, of course, PC pilots, virtual pilots are also going to be affected to a high degree because of the way that most people have their PCs set up with their peripherals. And so this is something that you guys can kind of internalize, think about, and then maybe practice your right-hand turns, and it will give you eventually a leg up over human opponents in DCS World multiplayer dogfights. Because if your right-hand turn is stronger than the other guys, then you can use that to your advantage in those dogfights. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take off here at Incirlik. Oh, check seat, that's not good. We've got a little bit of a crosswind here, and we'll talk about how this also plays in and affects crosswind takeoffs and crosswind landings as well. So first we'll go ahead and talk about the physics of aircraft and why the physics of aircraft make airplanes want to turn to the left as opposed to the right. And like I said earlier, this affects more propeller-driven aircraft. So for you guys who only fly jets, you guys can go ahead and most likely skip to the second half of this video where we actually talk about the physical limits of the human body that make us want to turn our aircraft to the left-hand side as opposed to the right-hand side. Of course, we all know that if you've taken any kind of private pilot training or anything of that nature, that there are multiple left-turning tendencies, such as P-factor, torque, spiraling slipstream, all these kinds of things that want to bring the nose of an aircraft to the left-hand side, either yawing or banking tendencies, And if you have a multi-engine airplane, this can be exacerbated even more, especially in a conventional twin aircraft. And so we'll get our flaps and our gear down here. I figure this video would go well with a nice backdrop of a sunset touch and go session here at Incirlik. And so as a result, turning the aircraft to the left-hand side because of those left-turning tendencies is a lot easier because you're going with those left-turning tendencies rather than fighting against them. Now, these tendencies are not completely absent from jet aircraft, such as our F-18 here, as a lot of the parts, fan blades, compressor blades, crankshafts all spin in the clockwise direction, same as a propeller-driven aircraft, and so there are some forces of torque in there, but they are not to the same extent as a truly propeller-driven aircraft. This also, of course, applies to turboprop aircraft as well, if you're a Microsoft Flight Simulator guy or you fly turboprops in real life. And as a result, because it's easier to go with rather than fight against those left-turning tendencies, for a long time, the standard for a traffic pattern has been to the left-hand side, to go with those left-hand turning tendencies rather than fighting against them. And so we got ourselves a bit of a left-to-right crosswind, and the left-to-right crosswind is more difficult to counteract and more difficult to work with than a right-to-left crosswind for the same reasons that pilots tend to not want to turn the aircraft to the right-hand side. And we'll tackle that more when it comes to our actual talk about the physiology behind this phenomenon. Whoop, a little too much power there, so we're going to go ahead and go around. And it's always a good thing to practice your crosswind landings. And so we'll go ahead and come on around. And of course, always good to remember that we're not in the business of saving landings, we're in the business of making good landings. And I had a little bit too much sink rate there and was sinking at too high of rate, added too much power to recover from it, and then of course just had to go around. But anyway, so standard traffic patterns are to the left-hand side. Of course, there are plenty of airports with right-hand traffic due to terrain, noise abatement issues, things of that nature. But the standard is that left-hand side just for the sake of making it easier on the pilot. Now, moving on to kind of the more physiological side, which is probably the side that affects aircraft with sticks in them more so than aircraft with yokes in them, and is probably the biggest thing that people are going to want to discuss and look at and think about when, in terms of DCS world, is the human body's limit to making the aircraft turn left versus turn right. And so this will affect you more if you have a stick layout where your stick is on your center between your legs, as the stick in the real-life F-18C is between your legs. So of course I have a nice center stick here. Or if you have your stick up on your desk in front of you, between your legs, lined up at the middle of your body on your desk in front of you, or off to the right-hand side, whether it's sitting, on a chair off to your right-hand side, it's mounted to the desk off to your right-hand side, or on the desk to your right-hand side. The higher up your stick is mounted, the worse this phenomenon is going to be for you. And so the actual physiological reason here that you're feeling not able to turn the aircraft to the right-hand side as strongly or as easily as you are to the left-hand side is due to the fact that your elbow and your shoulder does not like to rotate to the outside of your body. It likes to rotate to the inside of your body, but not the outside of your body. And so, of course, that's going to affect how you manipulate the controls in your sim pit, or the controls with a real aircraft, flying aerobatics, or whatever you may be doing. touch, and here's the go. Back on center line, and rotate. Gear up, flaps up. And I'm going to extend out to the end of the runway before I make my crosswind. And so you can actually test this as you're sitting here watching this video, or sitting on the couch, sitting in bed, you know, sitting in your car, whatever you're doing. Take your elbow, put your elbow so that the backside of your elbow is touching the front of your right hip, and try to rotate your forearm, your hand, in towards your left hip. Go ahead and do it. And can you see how easy that was to rotate your arm or your hand from your elbow touching your right hip to touch your hand touching your left hip? Pretty simple and easy, right? Now, take the same hand and try to rotate it outside of your right hip. And you'll find that it's not quite as easy to do that as it is to rotate your elbow to the left-hand side. Now, if you have your stick handy, sit in your cockpit position and try to rotate your stick or roll your aircraft, even if you're not in DCS right now, to the right versus rolling it to the left. You'll find that if you're really honest with yourself, no matter how strong you are, no matter how built up you are, that it's more difficult to move your stick to the right-hand side than it is to the left-hand side. And so as a result of that physiological challenge that the human body has with rotating your hand to the outside of your body from your elbow, this creates a phenomenon where pilots naturally want to turn the aircraft to the left-hand side because their stronger tendency is to roll the aircraft to the left and thus make left-hand turns. And so watch this little montage here as I fly with a couple different students in one-on-one trainings, and I haven't told them which way to turn after the merge in a dogfight, but every single time they turn to the left-hand side. And 3, 2, 1, lights on. Left and fights on.
11 o'clock.
And I'm a different Tomcat this time.
6 o'clock.
Now, as you can see in that montage, every single one turned to the left-hand side, because when you have your adrenaline pumping and you are excited and you're scared because your instructor, Mr. Spudknocker, is about to shoot you down, you want to turn and go for the strongest side that you possibly can, even if it's a totally subconscious reaction. It doesn't have to be something that is a conscious reaction. And so this is why I wanted to make this video and kind of get you guys to think about it a little bit, to make it more of something that is a conscious thought in your mind. Because if you can get yourself to turn to that right-hand side, you'll probably get yourself into an advantageous position when dogfighting against human players in DCS World multiplayer. Nice. All right. Time for the go. Trying to stay on sideline or center line. Laps up, gear up, and as a result, this also happens to real-life pilots as well. My mentor, who taught me everything I know about aerobatics that I talked about earlier, who was the aggressor pilot, he said that this phenomenon happens every single time when dogfighting against newer pilots in real life too. They will turn to the left-hand side every single time, unless you tell them otherwise, or you discuss this phenomenon in advance before their first, second, third, their first couple dogfights. Then, once they internalize it and understand that tendency, they start to mix it up more and more and more, adding those right-hand turns because they're actually thinking about it. Your right-hand turns can be just as strong as your left-hand turns in a dogfight, but it just requires some more conscious thought. because your unconscious body wants to go to the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side, because of that kind of restriction in the human body with moving your hand to the right-hand side as opposed to moving your hand to the left-hand side. And it's just something that's inherent in every single pilot. I see this from everyone from people learning to fly Cessna 172s up to aerobatics and even DCS World Dogfighting. This also comes into play with landing. So when it comes to actually consciously thinking about the issue that we're talking about here, it's a really good idea for you to hop in your F-18, your F-14, your JF-17, your F-16 here in DCS, and try to do some touch and goes like we're doing here, flying nothing but right traffic around the airport. It's a really good way to kind of feel that kind of restriction that's in your arm. And you can really kind of, if you really concentrate, you can really kind of feel that restriction in your elbow, in your bicep, and even a little bit in your shoulder. And once you kind of feel that restriction, you can then learn to compensate for it and make nice, really good right-hand turns around the traffic pattern. We made this one a bit wide, so sorry about that, guys. And this also comes into play with crosswind landings. Crosswind landings that are from right to left, the wind moving from right to left, are a lot easier to counteract than they are with crosswind landings moving from left to right. This is because people have the ability to roll the airplane to the right-hand side, people have the ability to roll the airplane to the left-hand side and then apply opposite rudder with their right foot. This is because, of course, most people are right-handed, and so as a result, most people are right-footed as well. So their dominant foot is the right foot, and so it's much easier to apply right rudder than it is to apply left rudder. That, of course, is the slip method down, which isn't used for large heavy jets like our F-18 here, but as a result, even with this left to right crosswind here, I am having to input left rudder in order to align the wheels with the runway at the last second before touchdown. And that's a little bit dicey because I would definitely say my dominant foot is my right hand foot, and so I'm not quite as precise on the rudder pedals, bringing the rudders to the left hand side as I am with bringing the rudders to the right hand side. Trying to stay on center line here. And we'll go ahead and take off. Gear up, flaps up. Trying to counteract that. And so it's just something to think about and something to internalize and think about the next time you go to dogfight against your friend. Try whipping out a right-hand turn past the merge and see if you can trip them up that way. And like I said, it really doesn't take anything to fix this, because it's not necessarily a problem, it's just a phenomenon that occurs with all pilots. Just think about it, practice it, fly some right traffic in your F-18, and see if you can get better at those right-hand turns. Now, another thing that tends to happen with aircraft with sticks that I see a lot in one-on-one lessons that I do with people is the fact that your right arm has weight to it, and so your muscles have to support the weight of your arm as you're holding the stick. And so as a result, a lot of people tend to have their stick kind of angled off to the right-hand side, just slightly, to begin with. And so you tend to, if there's no crosswind, you tend to walk the aircraft to the right-hand side, changing your heading to the right. And so as a result, pilots tend to have to make a lot of corrections when it comes to navigation. And so what you can do to alleviate that is to just very gently hold on to your stick. Rather than death gripping your stick where you're putting your whole arm's weight and your whole strength of your hand into holding that stick, just gently hold the stick, not in the palm of your hand, but in your fingertips. And this will put more of the weight of your arm off of the stick and into the muscles of your right arm, rather than resting that weight on the stick itself and then pulling your stick to the right hand side taking you off of heading and off of course as you're cruising along. Of course, when you're flying aerobatics, it doesn't necessarily make a big difference because you are working hard, you're maneuvering the aircraft hard with that right arm, you are feeling the forces and G's on the airplane, or in DCS World, you're concentrated on lining up that gun shot and that gun skill. But it does come into play a lot when it comes to very fine movements of the controls, such as when you're coming down with a crosswind landing like we are here, or you are lined up behind the tanker trying to get that sweet juice from that tanker so that you don't flame out on your way home. All these kinds of things are all done a lot better with that gentle fingertip pressure. My mentor called this phenomenon the meat hook phenomenon, that your right arm, paid out of meat, is kind of that big hook, that meat hook that's pulling the aircraft to the right hand side. And so as a result, you really just want to think about trying to keep, when you're doing these fine motor skills like this crosswind landing here, ear-to-ear refueling, or carrier landings, just try to keep that stick nice and gentle in your fingertips. And that's probably the best landing yet. Whoop, came off the left a little bit, correcting for that crosswind. And so let's go around in the pattern one more time. We'll make a full stop landing. And I'm interested to see what the comment section of this video looks like, because it's definitely something that is there, and I've seen it affect DCS World pilots quite a bit, actually, in the one-on-one trainings that I do, because I'm so concentrated on their airplane and seeing what they're doing and knowing what they're doing at the exact times in their cockpit, that I can tell when this phenomenon is definitely affecting them and their ability to fly in DCS World, especially when they're doing very fine motor skills such as lining up a fall line for a laser guided bomb drop, coming in for a landing, things like that. So we'll cut the power here, get the speed brake out. But what can you do as a DCS World pilot to kind of amend this and do what you can do to fix this issue? And there are plenty of things that you can do. You can take your stick situation, and if you move your stick from the right hand side of your desk to try to bring it to more the center of your desk if you can, that will certainly help. And then if you try to, a little bit of a balloon there, try to correct for that. Having a massive loss in FPS here, I'm not sure what this is about. And if you take your stick and if you can mount it and bring it lower rather than the top of your desk, that can be incredibly beneficial to preventing this phenomenon from affecting you more. And if you can bring your stick to a point where it's actually mounted between your legs, like it would be in a real aircraft, that can also go a long way to helping to prevent this. It tends to affect you more and more and more the higher your stick is mounted in your sim cockpit, and the further to the right your stick is mounted in your sim cockpit. Now, if you're also a Microsoft Flight Simulator pilot and you've got your left-handed Airbus stick or something of that nature that you're using as a stick for the left seat of an airliner, these same things will apply, except for the fact that it will apply in the opposite direction, that your left arm has the same limitations as your right arm physiologically. It's just going to be all in reverse. So I hope you guys found something interesting from this video. Like I said, I wanted to make a topic on this video because it is something that I've noticed more and more and more the more I'm aware of it, both in DCS and of course in flying in real life. And I wanted to see what you guys would think about it as well, and see if you guys would have any use for thinking about it in your missions and dogfights in DCS World, and see if it can make you guys that much better and that much more confident as a pilot in DCS, and make you guys better at doing those fine motor skills in DCS, as well as, of course, mixing it up on your opponents by turning right past the merge rather than always turning left. So, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, fly safe out there, and definitely give this video a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed it. And check out Battle Bars. Use Spud15 for 15% off your order. And it all goes to a good cause. A lot of their stuff goes to working with veterans and all that good stuff. So, yeah, fly safe out there, guys, and stay healthy.